Okay, and we're back here with Jazz Matters and the Jazz Matters podcast. Our guest today would be pianist Mr. O.J. Harper. And I'm here today with Von Coulter, as usual, partner in crime. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. O.J. is he's on the road, so he'll be chiming in a few. What we'd like you to do is subscribe to the podcast. Go to yesjazzmatters.org, and you can also look at the donation page and donate, because we are 501c3 and we really want to keep this format going. Also, you can go to the Jazz Matters store, and it is an apparel store, so you can buy sweatshirts, t-shirts, hoodies, and whatever else is on there. So, we're trying to beef that up a little bit. Also, we're trying to do Jazz Matters is trying to in the process rather of doing some virtual concerts. So we'll keep you informed on that. You'll be able to get all the information about that at yesjazzmatters.org. So, like I said, I'm here now, but definitely subscribe to it, like us, and we can continue to move forward with this format. Like I said, Von Coulter is here with Jazz Beats Radio. And Von, what's happening over there at Jazz Beats Radio right
A lot of growth. Just being able to keep the ball rolling. We've added a couple of people that a young lady that actually has a show. She's her name is Lorna, and she's out of Connecticut, and she is very well schooled in the music. We've had a chance to speak, and we're excited to have her come on board and add her repertoire to the Jazz Beats Radio family. And so we're looking for more talented people out there that want to do this genre of music and be able to educate the people about where it came from and where is it headed, Yeah.
So we were talking off air a little bit about an article you ran across recently with the Donald Byrd situation with the sampling.
I enjoyed reading the article because it kind of like I alluded to you in the conversation. It's just the fact that information like that is quite limited, if not it's non-existent. How the bridge between the foundational structure and the genres that have came after that are still very powerful, but the industry doesn't lend itself lending that information out so people can be aware of how much we are part of a family that was established long before publishing and recording became a prominent aspect to the recording business. So, when I get stuff like that, you got to wonder why isn't this why isn't this just, there's this knowledge extended out there, and it's kind of saddening to me to see that, you got to really, it's really, you literally got to really search for it, or you're surprised that somebody puts it out there. And so,
go ahead and tell us what it was, basically.
It was the composition Donald Byrd wrote. The album was produced by the Mizell brothers, by the way, and it was the album. Now it escapes me. But the name of the song was "Think Twice," and
Stepping Into Tomorrow.
Yeah, And yeah, Stepping Into Tomorrow, exactly. That's the name of the album. And the song was Think Twice, and it came out in the 70s, of course. And right around the mid 80s, it became a very sampled composition by a number of hip hop artists in the hip hop industry. Took it and ran with it, and a number of hip hop artists, became hit makers from sampling that music. And they actually, in the article itself, they had a chance to talk to the gentleman who was hired by Donald Byrd to come in and play drums on the tune, and that was Harvey Mason. And all those drum breaks, when you hear them, you know, especially when it comes down, when you hear these hip hop compositions, you say, okay, that's Harvey, you know, and it lets you know that the connection has always been there. But what can we do about the knowledge of this being present in the present day music form, music world, in the industry that currently is existing now? I don't think very many of them would have ever known this. You know.
Well, but when you think about it, back then when they were sampling, it wasn't
Mhm.
that they wanted, they needed to know who that was doing a particular sample phrase.
Right.
They just liked the sample. So they just took that and ran with it. They have probably had no idea who Harvey Mason was. You know what I'm saying? Or is, you know.
Hmm.
And so, but they liked what they heard. So, and then that's something in there. So once they sampled it and it got caught up in that circle, when all that type of music was sampling, and you could hear those samples in other people's stuff, the same sample, in other people's music. No, they had no idea it was Harvey Mason for the most part. You know what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, they had never even probably heard of Harvey Mason. But I think that once the record companies gotten a hold of the fact that a lot of the music was sampled, it was definitely a good thing for the people who created music, because it did help them, a lot financially. It really did.
Right.
And,
Right.
and like I
You know.
said, when it comes to the artists that's actually doing the sampling, some of them were pretty clever as far as how they would do certain things. Uh,
Right.
but that came later, a lot later. We're in the 90s. If you liked a certain sound but you couldn't sample it, what you would do is go and
Hmm.
try to find players of that era to actually play figures that came through that sound. And that way you're not really sampling it, you know what I'm saying? And you're only doing a fragment, or maybe just no more than one measure or two measures of a phrase. And
Hmm.
that's something that's not sampled, but you got a live person actually doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
So they figure ways to get around certain things. But for the most part,
Oh, God.
most of them they would rather sample it because, what I'm saying, of its authenticity. You know, the sound that it actually produced then is what they're dealing with. It's almost like them making musical gumbo. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. But
I,
but it's
I'm willing to give them the benefit of a doubt.
oh yeah,
I'm sure that that's what where their motive wasn't really to actually make it known that they sampled anything. They just
right,
decided they were going to
right,
throw it in there, and
right.
because they liked the beat, they liked the way it sounded, so they went with it. Yeah, I'm willing to go there.
Well, you said something a little earlier too, that how do you get the knowledge out to people, uh,
Mhm.
about stuff like that. Well, the only way you can do that really is you have to have some kind of format or class that you can educate people on music.
Right.
It's difficult to do it in in some educational institution, simply because in those institutions the people that are over music departments and so forth, they have a curriculum on how they want music, you know, to be taught. So when it comes down to like sampling stuff like that, uh, they only teach that in the schools that are like a, let's say, almost like a vocational type of music school. Where you can learn
Hmm.
the techniques of engineering and so forth. And because that'll incorporate all the sampling and whatever else you need to do, you would have that through this technology. But that only came through recently because of the computer. I mean, just because of the automation of the music. So that's it's not like sampling like we talked earlier, where people sampled before it was virtual. We talked about that off there. And what I mean by that, there have been many, many songs that were written way before the computer was a commercial product. And certain
Right.
artists would take a phrase from a certain song and they would use it. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
realistically, they they didn't sample it into the technical phrase that we know today, um, as far as sampling, but it was still a sample because the phrase itself was, something that they literally in their minds cut and paste into their work, without having to use a computer. So that's kind of interesting. So sampling is not new. It's just one of those things that,
No,
that
you're right. It
happened
isn't.
organically,
Right.
long ago, a long time ago. It's
Yeah.
almost like when you listen to a lot um, of bebop tunes. When you hear the bebop configurations, there are many bebop songs, but that concept of the movement of the chord changes is almost like as if it was sampled from back then. So you could put a melody across those, and you have a different song every time. But when you look at the underlying part of where the changes are moving, it pretty much is the same, when you're dealing with stuff like that. There's so
Hmm.
many of them songs that have been written just off of chord changes, and those chord changes are the same from one artist to the next, and they sample them and say, "Well, I like those changes, so I'm gonna put a head across it." And the concept and phrasing of like bebop is consistent also. So there we go. You know, that's an interesting
Hmm.
article. Can you tell people where they can find it? Check it out for themselves.
Yeah. The name of the website is, I believe it's called Jazz. And I know I saw it earlier. All About Jazz. That's what it's called. All
Okay.
About Jazz.
So all they have to do
And
is YouTube that, right?
yeah, yeah.
Go straight to it.
And they have their own um, web page as well, so you get a lot of other pertinent information about birthdays. And they break it down from composers to musicians to songwriters to who played the saxophone, trumpet, trombone, drums, percussions. It's pretty elaborate. A lot of information coming from All About Jazz,
Right.
and it's a pretty good source for researching the music and the artists, and they got quite a few very legendary photographs in there too. So
Well, I know that I mentioned to you also off air. I had seen an interview. It was basically an interview with Bradford Marcellus, Terrence Blanchard, Wayne Shorter, and
yeah.
there was something they touched on in the interview about musicians coming together without a formal, rehearsal, and just
Mm-hmm.
spontaneously uh, getting into the music. They knew what songs they were going to do, and they had some charts to it, but the actual so-called arrangement of it, was something else. The spontaneous way they approached it, and everybody by them being different individuals always had a very interesting way of approaching, the solo sections or the improvisation section and stuff. And they really didn't know, what they were gonna do, unless they were like by one person soloing, another person might say, "Well, where are you going with this?" You know what I'm saying? So, but they were right there in pocket. They knew enough to make it sound very interesting. The good thing about being spontaneous like that is that the musician has to be a good listener. If he's a good listener of the people that's playing around him, it doesn't
Right.
take a whole lot to make things gel really, really fast. You know what I'm saying? Because you got those people that do a lot of listening to their fellow comrades right there on the bandstand. Then you get arrangements that are like, unless you record them, you never hear them again. You know what I'm saying? And then we done like fantastic uh, uh, arrangements, or let's say spontaneous arrangements. You know? And that's always, to me, it's always been a good, real good way of exploring, the ins and outs of stuff like that. Because you can, as a musician, you can go in, let's say, to a jam session. And if the jam session is coordinated to where it is not chaotic, you know what I'm saying? Where, you got one horn player that plays like 60 courses of a song, you know what I'm saying? That's outrageous. But the thing is, if you got it where it's coordinated to where, the limitations are there on how many courses that you can do, you can come up with some pretty good stuff. But back in the old days, a lot of times players would play until they couldn't think of nothing else to play, for the most part, which was crazy, you know what I'm saying? But at
Right.
the same time, you know what I'm saying, there had to be another player to come up behind them in a jam session now. And has to actually come from a whole different angle to make his interesting or hers interesting, and not play the same phrases that the person in front of them play. You know, like I said, that spontaneous that being on the bandstand, having a spontaneous reaction to a particular song has always been something that I've always liked to do. Like I said, I like to take it to where it's it's like one of those things where it becomes organized noise. You see what I'm saying? It's you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
that when it becomes organized noise, it's time to stop. You know what I'm saying? And not deal with that. But when you're doing it and you're doing the phrases and coming after them with a different approach or your approach, it seems to make it a lot more interesting to listen to. A lot more interesting to listen to. And you're not really putting it down to where it's necessarily predictable. That's the other thing. It's not really predictable. So you could get a chance and get away with playing phrases, and believe it or not, the less you play or the fewer notes you play, um, always seem to be the things that hold into people's memories. Especially when you're playing live on stage. And in
Right.
some cases, I've seen people get up and play every note that they think, every note out of every tone, all 12 tones and stuff, in one song. You know what I'm saying? And actually said absolutely nothing. You know what I'm saying? Because you've done stretched it to the point to where it's not even interesting to listen to phrasing and stuff. So that's something that when they brought that out, that really resonated with the way I would perceive jam sessions and spontaneous arrangements, to be really set up, to do things like that. Uh, what if you were thinking about doing uh, over at Jazz Matters, we were thinking about doing a lot more of that kind of stuff live, uh, to try to basically, uh, like we always say, educate the people into really what's going on with the music, you know, and
Right.
that way, that way we can get a lot more response out of musicians all over, you know what I'm saying, to basically participate. And they would be able to learn a lot of things, you know, in that respect. But as we go and we work up our different phases in the culture of jazz music, let me ask you one thing. Since you play so many different forms over there at Jazz Beats Radio, and
Hmm.
uh, as far as your audience goes, how, I mean, is it like an even type thing, or do you get one more than the other as far as the audience listening to you, and or because they can request stuff from you, right?
Oh yeah, they can request. We do have a request line on our webpage if they're interested in hearing a certain tune. Um, I would think that the crowd or the audience that we're you know pursuing or want to keep around is the smooth jazz um, aggregate, um, and that is, I guess that's the main focus of our listeners. Um, that's our focus group. That's our demographic. Um, but within that, from what I can tell, is there's that group of the last group of baby boomers, as I like to call them, that came up during the 1960s that were able to experience the sound of the mid 50s, and because that's only 5 years from the 60s, 5 years, 55 would probably would be the the most prominent group, those that grew up, born in 55. Those folks like myself and of course we're still around, and they have a certain history with that sound, the cool jazz, the the contemporary, and and it was a level of it that that's still being prominent today. That's kind of like called contemporary jazz. That's probably in that same group from the 1960s all the way up until the 1980s. So um, there's that's a prominent group as well. But for the most part, our focus is always going to be on those individuals that are the millennials, the Gen Xers, the Generation Z, of course. But it's a struggle to maintain that because sometimes you get these other different genres of music like acid jazz and what I think it was called at one time. It's more like a ethereal sound, like the groups like Oregon and Mark Isham used to do back in the late '80s. That had that ethereal kind of like meditative sound. Um, that group still exists as well. So, but for the most part, our focus is always going to be on that smooth jazz group. And smooth jazz is a lifestyle and culture all its own, you know, and it's on the global scale. It's huge. It's huge.
Like
And so that
you mentioned that the type of music, like you were saying, meditative type stuff uh, uh, that preceded, I mean, actually before what they call smooth jazz. Um,
yeah.
and it made me just think, I just realized that there was an artist that was around here uh, named, young player named Nancy Taylor and Steve McCraw. They did an album
Yeah.
back during that time that had that same concept. And, and it, there were other artists. I think there was what was the name of it? There was another music group that used to do a lot of that type of stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
and I can't remember really the name of it. But when you mentioned that, it made me think of that. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I've done one of those records for. You know what I'm saying? it's been
Right,
been
exactly,
it's been a long
exactly.
time. You know, that was real meditative type stuff. You know, and I was like, wow, I gotta see if I can get a hold of that thing and to really see what was done on it. You know, make
Oh
sure.
yeah, it was one in particular that I remember wholeheartedly, and I happened to enjoy what he was doing, and his name was Andreas Vollenweider,
Yeah, because he
and
was one of the artists out there when I was doing. He just acted popular for the most part when I had
oh
Donis
yeah,
recorded. You know,
hmm
yeah,
yeah,
he was a harp player.
Vollenweider played that. What did he call it? The electronic pedal harp,
Yeah, yeah, electronic
and
harp.
it was, it's a beautiful sounding instrument,
Yeah, and
and
he did a lot of good things with it. I mean, and opened up a serious, opened up a lot of people's heads as far as making a move in that direction. Because there were a lot of
mhm,
acoustic players that played instruments like that, harps and so forth. That wasn't really uh, in a situation where they did a actual CD, where people can listen to that CD of that particular instrument. And of course, he used a lot of sound effects. You know what I'm saying when he was doing
yeah,
it,
exactly,
and that was kind of interesting that he did that because it kind of made me go and look at that a little bit harder. As far as different controlling pedals and stuff. And this was before. I mean,
right,
sequencing was in its infancy at that point, and
hmm
and you
hmm
kind of got a consistent, uh, basically a consistent sound coming off of it. Like for that meditation field. But that was kind of interesting. You remember any other groups? My
um,
hold on one second.
sure,
My computer something crazy. Hold on, but go ahead and talk. I'll get back.
yeah, I think let's see, uh, there were a few of them that were prominent in the 80s, and I'd have to thank goodness for one air personality at the time that was playing a number of those songs was um, the gentleman who had the radio show Jazz Flavors on one of the local stations here in Atlanta, and he would be playing a number of those very prominent songs. Um, and if you would hear some of the stuff that Pat Metheny was doing during that same time period, it kind of blended into that. Those sounds are coming from that meditative state. Um, and I think the main record label that was producing a lot of that music was a record label called Wyndham Hill.
Yeah, that's what I could think of. I was trying to remember that company, but yeah, they had a lot
Yeah.
of it because there was a guy that I can't. His name escapes me. Also, I think it was Carl Winter or Weather or something like that.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he did
I
some
think it was
stuff.
called Winters or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he did
Absolutely.
some stuff about the whales. He had this whale sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was cool. So you kind of knew really where the direction was going when that happened. You know what I'm saying?
True enough.
All right. Well, Bart, um, I guess our guest had a problem getting in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and
Okay. That's fine.
we'll
That's fine.
we'll get back on it. So don't forget, everyone, to subscribe to the channel, and of course, you can get us here at yesjazzmatters.org, and you can go and see everything you need to see about the organization. Go to the donate page as well as the Jazz Matters store, and that's yesjazzmatters.org. And and we sign off. Vaughn, let them know where they can get a hold of you.
Jazzbeatsradio.com. Um, you can find us there and read about what we do at Jazz Beats Radio. And you can also reach me at voncoulter.fm@gmail.com. That's voncoulter.fm@gmail.com. And also my YouTube page is Soulscapes on Jazz Beats Radio. Soulscapes on Jazz Beats Radio. And subscribe to that Jazz Beats Radio, YouTube page, because I'm starting to load up a lot of good stuff on there, music that I play, and have some comments about those great songs that you don't hear anymore. But I'm the only one doing it. I have no expiration date when it comes
Okay.
down to the music of that time period, and have it blend in and try to put together the finest mix of all of those generations of music compiled in that 4-hour show.
All right. And until the next time, Vaughn, I'll see you then.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right,
Peace.
we're out. Peace.